Well, good morning, brethren. Hope everyone had a good week. I had kind of a rough week at work this week. I'm not going to lie. And it's really the week that I had that kind of inspired this message. As I've always said, any message I give, it's never directed at anybody. It's always intended to be a message I feel that I need to hear, right? But I thought that maybe some of us might be able to relate. Now, I know I've asked this question before, but show of hands, does anybody here remember Nick at Night? Yeah. For those that don't know, Nick at Night was a block of programming on the kids' network Nickelodeon that occurred right around 6 p.m. or so and lasted all night into the early hours of the morning. And it consisted of like the classic television shows from the 1960s and 70s. I absolutely loved it as a kid. A lot of my references are from it. Remember watching things like Dragnet, and Rowan and Martin's Laughing, and The Dick Van Dyke Show, and many, many other, probably too much of it. It's a big part of the reason I feel like I was born in the wrong era, you know? But one of the shows was George Reeves as Superman. And in the intro, it introduced Clark Kent as a meek and mild-mannered reporter who would go into a phone booth and change it to dun-da-da-da, Superman, the Man of Steel, able to leap tall buildings in a single bound, etc., etc., etc. Turn to Matthew 5:5, and from the Sermon on the Mount. We all know this. We're very familiar with this verse, I should think. Matthew 5:5 reads, "Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth." You know, in today's era of Marvel movies, we see superheroes displaying phenomenal powers while battling the villains that they encounter. But did you ever notice the level of property destruction and explosions in those movies? If those kind of superheroes actually existed, could you imagine the cleanup job? Like, not to mention the loss of life. But I digress. What is meekness? Why would Jesus say that it is the meek that shall inherit the earth? I want to talk about the quality of meekness today. Merriam-Webster defines meekness as the quality or state of being meek, a mild, moderate, humble, or submissive quality. Submissive, quiet obedience. I think we can see the value that our God places in such an attitude. 1 Peter 3:4 says as much. 1 Peter 3:4 reads, "But let your adorning be the hidden person of the heart with the imperishable beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit, which in God's sight is very precious." Titus 3:2 has, I think, a fine definition of the trait of meekness. Titus 3:2 reads, "To speak evil of no one, to avoid quarreling, to be gentle, and to show perfect courtesy toward all people." Brethren, let's face it, this is a wonderful, wonderful thing to aspire to, but it's not always easy to achieve, is it? At work this week, I went into my job site, and second shift, as they often do, had left the place in a complete disaster area. It looked for all the world, y'all, like a bomb or several bombs had gone off. Anything and everything was out of place, filthy dirty. Boxes of stock were piled in the middle of the sales floor. It was chaos. And naturally, I was quite upset, right? I lit into the management and asked them, why did they leave it like this? You know, I worked so hard to leave it nice and orderly at the end of my shift. Now, I'll admit, brethren, I lost my temper. I raised my voice, said a few things that maybe crossed the line. I didn't swear at them. I didn't, but I made no uncertain terms of how I felt. But I felt justified. I didn't do that to them. I don't leave it like that for them. Why would they do this to me? Well, brethren, as you might imagine, I was taken to task for my behavior and ended up having several conversations with my boss. And I came home and I lamented to my sister, called my friends, complained about the unfairness of it all. Was I in the right, brethren? Was it unfair? Colossians 3:13 reads, bearing with one another, and if one has a complaint against another, forgiving each other, as the Lord has forgiven you, so you also must forgive. Brethren, whether or not I felt the way that things were handled was fair is immaterial. If, and that's a big word, that's the biggest word in the English language, as Brother Gene used to tell me all the time, if I had practiced meekness, the results of that day would have been starkly different. The Bible has quite a bit to say on meekness, brethren. Isaiah 11:4. Turn to Isaiah 11:4, and it reads, but with righteousness he shall judge the poor and decide with equity for the meek of the earth. And he shall strike the earth with the rod of his mouth, and with the breath of his lips he shall kill the wicked. Equity for the meek. God champions the cause of those who are submissive to authority. Ecclesiastes 10:4. Ecclesiastes 10:4 reads, if the anger of the ruler rises against you, do not leave your place, for calmness will lay great offenses to rest. Boy, I wish I'd read that one before I went into my shift on Monday night. Woo. Brethren, I want to remind myself of some practical ways that I can practice meekness in my everyday life. Zephaniah 2:3 reads, seek the Lord, all you humble of the land, who do his just commands. Seek righteousness, seek humility. Perhaps you may be hidden on the day of the anger of the Lord. First, brethren, if I want to practice meekness, I must first seek and submit to God's will. Now, that can be hard when I think that my will is better, can it? When I'm looking at things from my own perspective, it seems like I thought it was absolutely unfair, right? Philippians 2:3 reads, do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility count others more significant than yourself. Brethren, half the reason I was so offended was because I take pride in my job. I take pride in how my store looks. I didn't stop to think that the chaos that was left for me to deal with was a result of the shift before me struggling to put away stock in the midst of their busyness. If I had sought God's will, practiced meekness and humility, I would have just gone in, got to work. Secondly, if I want to practice meekness, I need to remember to take a moment and take a deep breath before reacting. Proverbs 16:32 reads, whoever is slow to anger is better than the mighty, and he who rules his spirit than he who takes a city. So I need to take time and take a moment before I fly off the handle. Proverbs 15:18 says, and you don't have to turn there for time's sake. Proverbs 15:18 says, a hot-tempered man stirs up strife, but he who is slow to anger quiets contention. Lastly, brethren, I need to remember that God is in charge, that those in authority over me are there for a reason, and my obedience or submission doesn't mean I have to agree with or like what's going on. 1 Peter 5:5-9 says, 1 Peter 5:5-9 says, likewise, you who are younger, be subject to the elders. Clothe yourselves, all of you, with humility toward one another. For God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. Humble yourselves, therefore, under the mighty hand of God, so that at the proper time He may exalt you, casting all your anxieties on him because he cares for you. Be sober-minded. Be watchful. Your adversary, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion, seeking someone to devour. Resist him, firm in your faith, knowing that the same kinds of suffering are being experienced by your brotherhood throughout the world. Brethren, I hope you can see the value of practicing meekness in everyday life, the value that it has in our walk with Christ. And I just want to take some time to say meekness is not a trait that this society or this world values. When you've got phrases like doormat, wallflower, patsy, people who are submissive are looked down upon. But we know that it's the eternal that we're seeking. We're seeking that which endures. So I need to place value on that trait no matter what the world says about it. Bless you. For those that want to know how things shaped up in my job, Thursday morning I spoke with my boss. And I quietly told her that there was no need to hash out what was said, that I took full accountability for my behavior, and that going forward, if I had any concerns about how the store was left, I would bring them directly to her and in a constructive manner. I apologized for losing my temper, and I thanked her for her patience with me. And I got very quiet, very meek. And here I stand, and I still have my job, and I still have my dignity. Ecclesiastes 7 verse 8 reads, "Better is the end of a thing than its beginning, and the patient in spirit is better than the proud." Brethren, let's continue to encourage ourselves and encourage each other to practice meekness, gentleness in our daily lives. I, for one, have learned my lesson. I'm going to leave the Incredible Hulk rage for the big screen, because what I found out this week is that meekness is its own superpower.